Hello everybody, this is James Lindsay and you are listening to New Discourses Bullets, where I give you a short summary of one topic from woke Marxism that I think we need to know in order to be able to defeat it. Today the episode is actually an open letter to young woke people, and so my normal listeners, this isn't exactly for you, but you should take it to heart, you should share it, you should think about it. But this is for young woke people. I think that we should care enough about young woke people and woke people more broadly to tell them the truth. I think it's very important, in fact, to drag woke people out of the false reality they inhabit and back to the truth. So I've written an open letter, and I'm going to actually read that for this episode. So, dear young woke people, I think you'll find what I have to say to you mostly incomprehensible here, but you need to hear it. What you are participating in right now, whether you know it or not, is Western Maoism, like Mao Zedong from China. This is what your schools and universities and influencers are miseducating you, in fact, brainwashing you into. Western Maoism. Maoism with American characteristics. And you need to know about where this goes, because it doesn't go well for you in the end. If your movement loses, you lose. If your movement wins, you lose. In the meantime, you lose yourselves. You are being molded, and that is the word. You are being molded into the Western equivalent of Mao Zedong's infamous Red Guard, which he made use of for just 2 years before destroying them. He explained clearly that different things are needed at different phases of the revolution, and then, when they're not needed anymore, they're done away with. He needed a youth rebellion to remove his political enemies and to consolidate his power. He needed that until he didn't need it anymore. In 1967, the Red Guard succeeded at defeating Mao's political rival in the CCP, Liu Shaoqi. And within months, Mao declared the movement too far left, too radical, too destabilizing, and he unleashed his People's Liberation Army to put it down. Some died. Most were sent to the countryside to get re-education in labor camps while living in squalor and primitive conditions. That was their reward. Yours will be similar. To get a little bit historical and philosophical, the whole philosophy behind woke is based upon the formulations of G.W.F. Hegel's vision, written down in the early 19th century. He explained how to move history to its intended end. You might call this the right side of history. And that's done through conflict. The recipe is simple. Manufacture the conflict, use the conflict, and move history with the conflict through a kind of social alchemy. You are the agents of that manufactured conflict. Change agents, or historical agents of change. What Hegel said about you, though, is this: history uses people and then discards them. As a movement, woke believes itself to be the movement of history. History is using you to move itself. Once it does, it will discard you. The conflicts of yesterday aren't relevant today, and they won't be needed tomorrow. The agents of history today lose their relevance in the instant they succeed, and history moves on necessarily without you and the conflict you generate. You know how everything in woke philosophy is said to be temporal and spatial, that is, contingent? It's all some matter of time and space in some place. Well, so are you. That's how this philosophy thinks about everything, including you. You are a contingency for the woke Marxist movement. You have your time until you don't. When you become useless or a hindrance to the movement of history, you will be discarded by history. Every Marxist and Hegelian movement in history has proceeded this way, and this one will not be different. I wish you luck with that. In the past, activists like yourselves were seen as useful political prostitutes, and after the revolution, you were lined up against the wall and shot, or deported to labor re-education camps and ground into destruction. Mao explained all of this in 1957. Though if you've read it, you probably can't realize that it applies to you because you think you're on the right side of history. He separated the world into, quote, the people and enemies. And he detailed how each of these are to be properly dealt with. The enemies are to be hated, silenced, bullied, even beaten and destroyed, sometimes killed. That's mostly your job, though the government will help, just far enough so that it doesn't look tyrannical. The people, on the other hand, are to be handled differently. They're to be re-educated, brainwashed, criticized, struggled, until they hold all and only the right opinions, and never the wrong ones, which is a process that will take their entire lives. It's never done. That's what you've signed up for, thinking yourselves virtuous, thinking you're going to do better, seeking absolution for your good fortune and your privilege, seeking revenge for the iniquities you perceive in your so-called lived experience. Everyone in this system is abused, though, and everyone who participates in it becomes an abuser. You know it, you live it, you give it, and you receive it constantly. Abuse. What you need to understand about the people you've been trained to see as your enemies, you might call them transphobes or racists or fascists or homophobes or whatever else, is that most of these people you think are those things are not those things at all. Yes, there are some out there, but most are not that. You have been trained to hate, allegedly in the name of stopping hate. These people are by and large trying to warn you, not trying to uphold oppression against you. Now, what you need to know about the people in the movement you're supporting, the people, as Mao had it, which includes your friends in the woke movement, is that you are less than disposable to these people. Being contingent barely covers it. The woke movement pretends to care about you, or worse, people who look like you, but it does not care about you. It is using you so its sociopathic fringe can gain power over society, using you as cannon fodder for their unconventional political warfare apparatus. Instead of living your life, growing, learning, preparing a future, building a family, you're doing activism for them. And they will discard you. And I mean it. They will discard you. Why? Because you are worse than contingent. You are worse than disposable. Once they get power, you actually become a problem. You don't just become obsolete as the revolution succeeds, you become a liability to what follows. You're being trained by this movement right now to be a destabilizer. That's what all this disrupt and dismantle stuff is about. You are misled to believe that you're disrupting and dismantling systems of oppression, but you're merely displacing the existing society for one they will seize control over. You're disrupting and dismantling the foundations of your own liberty so that tyrants can rule over not just the people that you have been trained to hate, but over everyone. They need you to destabilize the existing system, but they do not need anyone to destabilize the new system they have planned for us. Their intention is to establish a perfectly stable system with them, and not most of you, on top of it. And people trained and brainwashed to be destabilizers will be a problem in such a system. Mao said that himself. Like I said, he said the handling of the people is different in the different phases of the revolution. First, you encourage and support destabilizers to break down the existing system. Then, when you have power, you crack down on them so that there is total stability under the new standard. He called this standard socialist discipline under democratic centralism. Today, it's called sustainability and inclusion, and it's managed under something called stakeholder capitalism. You are an asset to this movement today and will be a liability to it tomorrow. You will be discarded coldly and, if necessary, violently. Not by your perceived enemies, but by the movement you are actually supporting. Make no mistake, this fate has awaited the change agents of every red revolution in history. Communist defectors have been trying to tell you for decades, longer than most of you have been alive. It's written all over the pages of history of communist and other tyrannical regimes, if you will just read them. It will not be different in anything except method this time. If you, as woke Marxists, win, you surely lose. All but the most sociopathic and sycophantic of you, in which case you have to hollow yourselves out, sell your souls if you even have one left by then, and become a true monster of history. If you don't believe me, let me ask you, do you see any identity politics in China today? Is China woke? Will it go woke? No. They already did that. And that phase of the revolution is over. It is viciously suppressed there, and they laugh at you here in the West and call you a Baisou, white left. They know what you are and how misinformed and misguided you are. Their operatives attempt to stoke these fires and use you because you are strategically useful to their anti-American aims, which you have been brainwashed foolishly into sharing. In China, however, they are openly encouraging patriarchy and masculinity. They're racially ruthless. They stamp out homosexuality. Why? They did their intersectionality already years ago with their red and black identity groups. They got what they wanted out of it, and now they've discarded it and its change agents in favor of the power that they were able to seize. Well, that's your future too. It looks like this. Look at the screen, scan your face, and smile for the government, and don't you dare signal in any way that you think anything that you shouldn't be thinking. Whatever they decide is the right thing to think. You have been falsely convinced that you're the protagonists in a vast morality play called the arc of history, and that you're bending it toward justice, that you're on the right side of history, and that feels good, right up until the boot comes crashing down on your face. Then they say you'll realize it. You are bending the arc of history, of course, if we can even indulge such a metaphor, but you're bending it straight into the 21st century gulag, whatever those will look like in our increasingly Black Mirror society. You will be thought reformed or you will be discarded. So what do you want to be? Do you want to be its guard, Agent Smith? Would you like to be its corrupt administrator? Is it worth the sale of your soul? Some of you might aspire to such a demonic station in your lives, but most of you don't. You actually want to do the right thing, and you will be subjected to this instead. Even if you take up this evil ambition, don't you know where it goes? Constant paranoia, constant fear, constant risk. The Red Guard was utilized to destroy Mao's political enemies in the CCP. And what will you do when they change the specifications of the ideology that you're supposed to support? Perhaps one day they'll decide that trans rights are now too expensive and disruptive for a new system that no longer needs that means of social agitation. What will you do? Resist? Good luck with that, comrade. So if you win, you lose. You have a right to wonder how this happened to you. Why have your generations been co-opted into this horrible situation? Your education, your schools, your entertainment, your universities, your peers tried to make you change agents and global citizens instead of educated adults. If this system wins, you lose because you know too much and are too big of a problem. Your only option will be to sell your soul to it, and you have to ask, how much is that worth to you? And do you think I'm kidding about that, by the way? Mao said, not to have correct political opinions is like not having a soul. That's what's at stake. Think about that and what this is costing you, whether you participate in it or cower against it. Doesn't this ring true, though? That's what you're sacrificing. Every time you tell a lie to fit in, you sell part of your soul. And how many lies have you told to fit in with the critical crowd around you? This corruption of you and your future is happening all around you, but most importantly, in place of your education, which could otherwise protect you from it. You're not getting the education you could be, or perhaps aren't getting a real education at all. You're not learning to be informed, independent adults who can answer questions about reality and navigate it successfully. You're being taught to have to defer at every turn to some kind of bogus expert, even to answer a question like, what is a woman? There are, of course, costs to this, and not just the obvious ones for you and your future on a personal level. The thing you consider your education itself is simultaneously being degraded in every meaningful sense of the word. It is being corrupted at its most essential level. You are losing your chance to get educated while the thing we call education itself is corrupting itself into its opposite. You are becoming less functional for the world ahead of you, so your education is corrupted, and you're becoming less and less marketable in the future world, whichever system wins. So the credentialing function education serves is also being corrupted. How useful are you going to be in the coming system, whichever one wins, if you are completely uneducated? Not just a destabilizer, but useless. Of course, the perversity of this is that they're not just doing this to you, they've convinced you to demand it for yourself. You have to demand it for justice. And so you do. Whichever system wins, you need to understand that you're getting degrees that are increasingly being seen as liabilities, not assets, in the working world that lies around and ahead of you. If that future is not woke, you're a liability to the future because you've been trained to be a woke destabilizer and learn to focus on social theory instead of gaining a genuine education and real skills. If that future is woke, on the other hand, you're a liability to it because you've been trained to be a destabilizer that the incoming system not only doesn't want but can't abide. And again, they've convinced you to demand this in place of your genuine education. It's sick. You have at most one option, supposing the woke win, and that's to sell out completely, to have nothing authentic left about yourself. The only place you will have a future is inside the most corrupt mega corporate sector that is our new Western Soviet. A council of stakeholders that knows the science of right human relations and holds the keys to sustainable development in a circular economy. If it supports trans rights and reducing emissions today, you will support those things. If it changes its mind tomorrow for the glory of the new system, so will you, or you will be eliminated. Your only path to success inside the system you advocate for is to become a hollow, soulless functionary in a fascistic megacorporate and/or governmental public-private partnership machine. Your only path to success outside of this system is to abandon this activism as soon as possible and start healing yourself psychologically, emotionally, and educationally. Your fate, if the woke system wins, is to be disposed of or hollowed out and used as a functionary of its changing whims, and this should have little appeal to you. It certainly won't bring about justice or satisfaction, and it won't allow you to be a prosperous individual or an individual at all. Your false prosperity will be available in direct proportion to your inauthenticity and corruptibility, the markers of your true utility to the machine you don't seem to realize you're supporting. There's no you on the other side of this. On the other hand, your fate, if the woke system loses, is a hard life that's made easier only by repenting of these errors and working to correct them, and the sooner the better. Already, employers throughout the West increasingly suspect that if you even have a college degree at all, you're probably woke, radically leftist, entitled, unlikely to work hard, likely to create a hostile working environment, underskilled or unskilled, and likely to sue if you're fired even on perfectly solid and reasonable grounds. They have every reason to believe this. That makes you very, very unattractive. If you are woke, they know it's true. You actually are a liability to them, and many of them are only still hiring you today because they have to keep their place in the corrupt corporate scoring schemes that control the way business is done now in the West. So you're either unhireable or hireable only as an asset to satisfy the ESG demands of a sprawling corrupt bureaucracy. Isn't that great? And what happens if it gives way? Who are you? And if you help it succeed and participate in it, what are you? So the question is, why you? Why not somebody else? Why now? Why you? Because you happen to be at the age you are at the worst time in Western history to be the age you are. That's it. Because many of you come from wealth and status and other resources the system covets and requires to succeed. You see, they're not really against privilege in the woke Marxist movement. They actually really like privilege. They just want to seize it and redistribute it and repurpose it to their ends. You are a resource to them. They need those resources. They need your enthusiasm and your zeal. They need your talent. They need your impressionable minds. They need the future citizens and the future leaders of the world. But you must remember, history uses people and then discards them. So they won't need you for long. and they'll only need you for specific purposes. Then you will either be corrected or discarded, unless you choose to come off worse by selling out. So my message to you about the woke Marxist movement is simple. You need to know what you're really involved in. Stop participating, deprogram yourself and your friends, and start fighting for the blessings of liberty that allowed you to have the privilege to think this way in the first place. You can and might lose it. You're the first generations in American history to face the loss of liberty. But if you support the woke movement, you do so by enslaving yourselves. You have been sold a false promise of liberation in place of liberty, and you need to realize that you're being scammed. Liberation movements are lies. Mao called his army, the same one he dispatched to destroy your counterparts in the Red Guard, the People's Liberation Army, and he called it that for a reason. Liberation is a lie. The oldest recorded cautionary tale in human history is the story of the serpent and Eve in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, and it warns about this specifically. It warns humanity about liberation, and you can understand that message whether you are religious or not. Liberation is a destructive lie. We cannot liberate ourselves from the truth or from reality. If you liberate yourself from a free society, you end up in a tyranny. You need to fight for liberty. You think you are in chains, but your chains have been forged by frauds and are locked only in your heads. You are the future. Your choices matter. Choose better.